Before there was a map with a border, there was the land. For over 10,000 years, this wasn't a wilderness, it was a home. From the Haida on the west coast to the Mi'kmaq on the east, hundreds of nations lived here with sophisticated systems of government. Take the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. While Europe was still ruled by absolute monarchs, the five nations were practicing one of the oldest participatory democracies in the world. They called this land Turtle Island. The first European contact wasn't a conqueror, it was a fisherman. In the late 1400s, European boats found the Grand Banks off Newfoundland. There was so much cod, they said you could walk across the water on their backs. But it wasn't until Jacques Cartier sailed into the Gulf of St. Lawrence in 1534 that the name Canada was first whispered. He kidnapped two sons of Chief Donnacona. When they spoke of the Kanata, the village, Cartier thought they meant the entire land. A misunderstanding gave a nation its name. France didn't just want fish, they wanted brown gold, beaver fur. In 1608, Samuel de Champlain founded Quebec City on a cliff overlooking the St. Lawrence. This was the birth of New France, but New France was fragile. To grow the population, King Louis XIV sent the Filles du Roi, the king's daughters, nearly 800 women who traveled across the Atlantic to marry settlers and build families. These are the ancestors of millions of French Canadians today. Life was a struggle of survival and diplomacy. The French survived because of the Indigenous people, who taught them how to navigate the vast interior via canoe and survive the brutal winters. This created a new culture, the Métis, born of the union between European fur traders and Indigenous women. They would become the oarsmen of the North, the backbone of the fur trade. But the British were watching. They had the 13 colonies to the south and the Hudson's Bay Company to the north. By the mid-1700s, North America was a chessboard for the two greatest powers on Earth. The climax came in 1759. On the Plains of Abraham, the British General Wolfe and the French General Montcalm met in a battle that lasted less than 30 minutes. Both generals died, but the British won. France was out. But here's the twist. Britain didn't force the French to become English. In a rare move of pragmatism, the British passed the Quebec Act of 1774. It allowed the French to keep their Catholic faith and their civil law. Why? Because the American Revolution was brewing to the south, and Britain desperately needed the French Canadians to stay loyal. It was the first Canadian Compromise. When the Americans finally revolted against the king, thousands of loyalists fled north. They didn't want a republic, they wanted the crown. This doubled the population, but created a pressure cooker of tension between English and French, and between the people and their colonial governors. Then came the War of 1812. The US invaded, thinking Canadians would welcome them as liberators. They were wrong. For the first time, English speakers, French speakers, and Indigenous warriors, led by the legendary Tecumseh, fought together. They didn't fight for Britain, they fought for their homes. But peace didn't bring harmony. By 1837, the colonies were fed up with the Family Compact, an elite group of men who controlled everything. Bloody rebellions broke out in both Upper and Lower Canada. They were crushed, but they sent a clear message. The people wanted responsible government. They wanted to rule themselves. By the 1860s, the colonies were in trouble. The fur trade was dying. The American Civil War was raging next door, and Britain was tired of paying for Canada's defense. It was time for a big idea. John A. Macdonald, a crafty lawyer from Kingston, and Georges-Étienne Cartier, a former rebel from Quebec, formed an unlikely alliance. They spent weeks in Charlottetown and Quebec City, debating, arguing, and, legend has it, consuming vast amounts of champagne. They weren't just building a country, they were building a railway. They promised a train track that would link the Atlantic to the Pacific. On July 1, 1867, the British North America Act went into effect. Canada was born, not through a revolution or a guillotine, but through a series of meetings and a very long legal document. It was a dominion, a self-governing nation that still honored the Queen. From 4 provinces to 10 and 3 territories, from a fur trading outpost to a G7 nation. Canada's origin story is unique. It wasn't built on a single identity, but on a series of difficult negotiations between different cultures. It is a story of great achievements, like the Transcontinental Railway, and great failures, like the treatment of the Indigenous people who were here first. Canada isn't a finished product. It's an ongoing experiment in how different people can live together on one massive, beautiful piece of land. The village has become a home for the world.